The shy farmer hid an Apache woman in his barn, but she returned with her people asking for his hand. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Of straw and set to work cleaning her wounds. He had no medical training, but he did what he could, using water from his well and bandages from his old shirts. The woman barely stirred, but when she did, her eyes locked onto his with a look of gratitude, though it was clear she was still frightened. She said nothing at first, but Samuel could sense she was trying to piece together her next move. Who was she? Why was she running? And most importantly, who was chasing her? Samuel didn't ask. He just stayed with her through the night, offering whatever comfort he could. As the night wore on, Samuel found himself drawn to the woman. She was strong, despite her injuries. The way she held herself, even in pain, was unlike anyone he had ever met. In the quiet of the barn, under the soft light of the moon, he began to wonder if this stranger might be the change he had unknowingly been waiting for. Would she leave when she recovered, or would she stay? That was a question Samuel could not answer yet. He knew only that, for the first time in a long while, he felt less alone. The morning sun came up, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Samuel stepped out of the barn to tend to his chores, but when he returned, he was met with a sight that stopped him dead in his tracks. Standing at the barn door, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite place, was the woman. She had stood up, and despite the pain, she had managed to make her way to the entrance. She was different now, calmer, but there was a new intensity in her gaze. Samuel was about to speak when he saw the movement behind her. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then the sound of hooves grew louder. He turned around and saw them, dozens of warriors on horseback, riding towards his farm. His heart skipped a beat. The woman stepped outside, and with one hand, she held something small, a pendant that caught the light. She held it up, and the warriors stopped in their tracks, all eyes on her. The leader of the group, a tall, imposing figure, dismounted and approached the woman. The air was thick with tension. Samuel didn't know what to expect, but he could feel his pulse racing. The woman turned back to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of emotions. And then, to his shock, she spoke the words that would change his life forever. "I have come to ask for your hand in marriage," she said, her voice steady yet filled with a quiet strength. "My people have decided to reward you for your kindness. You saved my life, and now we come to offer you a life in return." The woman's words hung in the air like a challenge, reverberating through Samuel's mind as the warriors waited in tense silence. He couldn't quite grasp what had just been said. Was this really happening? Did she, and her people, want him to be a part of their world? His heart pounded as he looked from the woman to the group of Apache warriors who stood like statues, their expressions unreadable. The leader, tall and proud, remained still, his gaze never leaving Samuel. The woman, who had been nothing more than a stranger lying in his barn just days ago, now stood before him, an emissary of her people. "You saved me when no one else would," she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Now, my tribe offers you a place with us, if you choose it." Samuel was still reeling, unable to respond right away. He had never expected anything like this. Never in his wildest dreams had he thought that his simple act of kindness would lead to something so monumental. As the minutes passed, the silence grew heavier, and the warriors watched him expectantly, as if they too were waiting for him to make a decision. The woman's gaze softened, and she took a step forward. "I understand if this is overwhelming," she said. "But my people value strength, not just in battle, but in kindness. You showed that strength when you helped me." Her words sank into him slowly. He wasn't used to praise, especially not from a group of warriors. And yet, her sincerity was undeniable. She wasn't just offering her hand. She was offering a place among her people, a new life. "Why me?" Samuel finally found his voice. "I'm just a farmer, a man with nothing." She smiled, a slight, knowing smile that reached her eyes. "It is because you are a man of nothing that you are worthy. You have nothing to lose, and yet you chose to help me, a stranger. That is more valuable than gold." The warriors behind her murmured in agreement, their voices low but firm. Samuel's mind raced. What was he to do? His whole life had been spent avoiding attachments, avoiding the very people now standing before him. He had never felt worthy of their world, their way of life. But this woman, with her quiet strength and resolve, made him question everything he had known. You don't have to decide right now, she said, as though reading his thoughts. Take your time, but know that my people will wait. She stepped back, her gaze still fixed on him, and then, with a signal, the warriors mounted their horses and began to move away, leaving Samuel standing alone in front of his barn. The breeze stirred the air around him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a deep, gnawing sense of uncertainty. As the warriors rode off, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed in his life. He had been offered a chance at something he never thought possible. A new life, a new beginning, with a people whose strength and honor he had always admired from afar. But could he accept it? Could he really leave behind the life he had worked so hard to build? For days, he didn't know what to do. He tended to his land as usual, but his mind was elsewhere, constantly drifting back to the woman and her people. What did they want from him? What would his life be like with them? He had never been part of a tribe, never been part of something larger than himself. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that his life, as it was, seemed empty in comparison to what they were offering. He had always lived alone, always kept to himself. Perhaps it was time for a change. He walked to the edge of his farm. He looked back one last time. Then, with a deep breath, he turned and walked toward the horizon, toward a future he couldn't yet imagine. The woman was waiting for him. She stood with a few of her warriors by her side, her eyes soft but resolute. When she saw him approaching, she smiled, and this time, it wasn't just gratitude. It was something more, something deeper. It was a promise of what was to come. Samuel's footsteps were heavy on the worn dirt road as he walked toward the camp where the Apache woman awaited him. The air was thick with the scent of pine and sagebrush, and the distant sound of the wind through the trees seemed to hum with the promise of something new. With each step, his heart pounded harder, torn between fear and excitement. He had made the decision, but the reality of it felt much more daunting now that it was time to face the tribe. He had left his quiet, solitary life behind, and now he was walking into the unknown. As he approached the camp, the first thing he noticed was the quiet. It wasn't the silence of stillness, but a kind of waiting tension, the calm before something monumental. The Apache warriors stood at attention, their eyes sharp, watching him carefully as he entered the circle. They had greeted him with little more than a nod the day before, but today, the mood was different. The air crackled with anticipation. The woman was standing by the fire, her posture as regal as it had been the first time he saw her. Her dark hair was tied back in a braid, and the long, flowing robes she wore seemed to shimmer under the sun. She looked every bit the part of a leader, and Samuel wondered again what he had gotten himself into. She turned to face him as he drew near, her face unreadable, but her eyes warm with recognition. "You came," she said simply, her voice calm but strong. Samuel nodded, his throat tight. "I did," he replied, his voice carrying the weight of his decision. For a moment, they simply stood there, the wind rustling the leaves around them. Then, she motioned for him to sit by the fire, and he complied, his mind still racing. As he sat, he could feel the gaze of the warriors on him, and for the first time, he understood the weight of their presence. They weren't just a tribe. They were a community, a force of nature, bound together by a shared history, a shared survival. And now he was a part of it. The woman sat beside him, her posture straight and proud. She didn't speak right away, but her presence was enough. Samuel felt the shift in his own thoughts. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the entire tribe, about the strength they shared, and perhaps, in time, about his place among them. "You've made the right choice," she said after a long pause. "This is not an easy life. We live by our own rules, by the ways of the land, and by the strength of our bonds." Samuel glanced around at the warriors, each one poised, their hands resting on the hilts of their weapons, their faces unreadable. He wasn't sure if they saw him as an ally yet, or if he still had to prove himself. But the woman's words gave him a sense of purpose. He wasn't just a stranger here anymore. He was part of something larger. "I don't know what I can offer," Samuel said, his voice quiet. but I'm willing to learn. She smiled, a small but genuine smile. It's not about what you offer. It's about what we build together. The words hung in the air between them, and Samuel felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He had no idea what the future would hold, but he knew one thing. He was no longer alone. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the camp in a warm, golden glow, Samuel felt the weight of his past life fall away. He was no longer the shy farmer. He was no longer the solitary man who kept to himself. He was part of a tribe now, part of something greater than himself. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, Samuel felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the fire crackled and the warriors began to gather for the evening meal, Samuel looked around the camp, a sense of belonging creeping in. This was the beginning of something new, and he was ready to embrace it. The woman, his guide and protector, turned to him once more. Tomorrow, she said softly, you will meet with the council. They will decide your place among us. Samuel nodded. He had come this far, and he was ready to face whatever came next. This was just the beginning. The following morning, Samuel woke before dawn, the chill of the night still lingering in the air. The camp was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves and the soft murmurs of the warriors settling in for the day. He had been given a place by the fire, a small but significant gesture. The warmth of the flames had offered him a sense of peace, a connection to something he had never known. As he rose from his bedroll, he looked around at the people he was now part of. His mind raced with thoughts of the council, the next step in this new life he was forging. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew that today would change everything. The woman, who had become both his guide and protector, was already awake, tending to the fire. Her movements were calm and precise, as though she had done this 1,000 times before. She looked up as Samuel approached, offering him a small nod of acknowledgement. Are you ready? She asked, her voice steady. But there was an undercurrent of something more. A challenge. A test. Samuel nodded, though his heart beat faster. I think so. She smiled, a flicker of warmth in her expression. Good. The council will want to see your strength, not just in action, but in spirit. Remember, we value honesty above all. Samuel had heard that before. Honesty was the foundation of everything in their world. He had nothing but truth to offer, but would it be enough? As they walked toward the gathering place, a small clearing surrounded by towering pine trees, Samuel felt the weight of the eyes upon him. The warriors, the people who had welcomed him into their fold, all watched as he approached. The council, made up of the tribe's most respected members, sat in a circle, their expressions unreadable. The woman, who had led him here, stepped forward, her presence commanding. She gestured for Samuel to join her in the center of the circle. As he did, the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. This was it. This man has come to us, she began, her voice clear and strong, seeking to join our tribe. He has proven his worth in action and in heart. Now, we ask that he prove his strength in spirit. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions stern, yet not unkind. One of the elders, a man whose face was lined with the wisdom of many years, spoke up. What is it that you seek, man of the land? Samuel took a deep breath, the words forming in his mind before they escaped his mouth. I seek to belong, he said simply. I have spent my life alone, and now I know that I am meant to be part of something greater. I offer myself, my strength, and my heart to this tribe. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. The council members leaned forward, their eyes narrowing as they considered his words. Finally, the elder nodded. It is not enough to seek belonging, he said slowly. You must earn it, not just with actions, but with your willingness to understand our ways. Samuel nodded again, determined. I will learn. I will prove myself. The elder smiled, though it was a smile tinged with something else, something that made Samuel wonder just how much more he had to prove. Then you will learn, and we will see what you are made of. The woman who had guided him to this moment stepped forward once more. You will begin today, she said. There is work to be done, and you will join us. Not as a stranger, but as one of us. Samuel's heart swelled at her words. He had been accepted, not just by her, but by the people. The council may have tested him, but it was the tribe that had truly welcomed him. And as he looked around at the warriors, the people who had once been strangers, he realized that he was no longer alone. As the day wore on, Samuel worked alongside the tribe, learning their ways. He helped tend to the horses, worked the land, and learned the rhythms of their life. It was hard, grueling work, but it felt right. It felt like he had found his place. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Samuel sat by the fire with the woman and the others. The stars were beginning to appear above them, and for the first time in a long while, Samuel felt at peace. He had made his choice, and though he didn't know where the road would lead, he knew one thing for sure. He had found his family. Days passed, and with each one, Samuel grew more accustomed to the rhythms of life within the Apache tribe. The work was hard, but there was something deeply fulfilling about it. He no longer felt the loneliness that had once plagued him. Instead, he felt a sense of purpose, a connection to the land and to the people around him. The woman who had welcomed him into her world, the one who had once been a stranger, now felt like an anchor in his life. She taught him not just the physical tasks, how to ride, how to work with the horses, how to hunt, but also the values that guided the tribe. Respect, strength, honor. These weren't just words to them. They were the foundation of their lives. He had always lived by his own set of rules, but these new lessons began to shape him in ways he hadn't expected. Samuel found himself spending more time with her, not just as a student, but as a friend. They would sit together by the fire at night, talking about the past, the present, and the future. She spoke of her people's struggles, their triumphs, and the long history that had brought them to this point. Samuel listened, captivated by the depth of her knowledge and the strength of her spirit. He had never encountered anyone like her before. Over time, the distance between them, once filled with uncertainty and doubt, began to close. There was a quiet understanding between them that went beyond words. But Samuel still felt a pull, a feeling that something important was yet to come. He knew that his acceptance into the tribe was not just about learning how to live among them. It was about proving himself worthy of the trust they had placed in him. One morning, after weeks of training, the woman came to him with a new task. "Today, we will go to the sacred mountain," she said. "It is a place where our ancestors gather their strength and wisdom. You will come with me, and you will face a trial." Samuel had heard stories of the sacred mountain, a place where only the bravest went. It was said that the mountain held secrets, and that the trials there were meant to test not just one's physical strength, but their spirit and heart. "What kind of trial?" he asked, his voice steady, though he felt the familiar rush of uncertainty in his chest. "You will face your fears," she replied simply. "It is not about defeating something, but about understanding it. The mountain will show you who you truly are." The journey to the mountain was long, taking them deep into the heart of the wilderness. Samuel found himself growing closer to the woman, her steady presence reassuring him as they trekked through the dense forest. The land seemed to pulse with life, and for the first time, Samuel felt completely in tune with it. When they finally reached the base of the mountain, the air felt different. It was thick with energy, and Samuel could sense that something powerful was ahead. The woman turned to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You will be alone on the mountain," she said. "But do not fear. You are not truly alone." She gave him a small smile, a silent encouragement, before stepping back. Samuel took a deep breath and began the climb. The path was steep, the rocks jagged, but Samuel moved with purpose. As he ascended, the world around him seemed to shift. The further he climbed, the more the air thickened with a strange presence. He could hear the wind, but it was more than that. It was as if the mountain itself was speaking to him, urging him forward. At the summit, Samuel found a large rock formation that seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. He knelt beside it, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. It was here, in this moment of silence, that the mountain began to reveal its truth. The vision came in a rush, overwhelming and powerful. He saw flashes of his past, the loneliness, the pain, the isolation. He saw the farm, the life he had left behind, and he realized something he hadn't before. He wasn't running away from his past. He was embracing a new future, a future with the people who had shown him what it meant to truly belong. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, and Samuel was left with a deep sense of clarity. He stood, the weight of the experience settling into his bones. The trial had not been about conquering anything external, but about conquering the fears and doubts within himself. As he descended the mountain, the woman was waiting for him. Her eyes met his, and she nodded once, as if she had known what the trial would reveal. "You have passed," she said. "You are one of us now." Samuel felt a wave of emotion wash over him. The mountain had shown him the truth. He wasn't just part of the tribe because of the life he had left behind. He was part of it because of the strength he had found within himself. He had finally become the man he was meant to be. As the days passed, Samuel found himself more deeply immersed in the Apache way of life. The woman who had once been a stranger to him had become his guide, not only teaching him how to live among her people, but also how to understand them. They were not just warriors and hunters. They were a community bound by tradition, respect, and a deep connection to the land. Samuel worked alongside them, tending to the crops, caring for the animals, and learning their customs. The sense of belonging that had once seemed impossible now felt natural, as if he had always been a part of something greater. But despite this, Samuel knew that he still had a long way to go. He had passed the trial on the mountain, but there was more to prove. The tribe's leader, the elder who had welcomed him with a stoic gaze, had made it clear that his journey was far from over. One evening, as the firelight flickered across the faces of the warriors sitting in a circle around him, the woman turned to him. "There is more you must learn," she said, her voice steady. "Your trial was just the beginning. Now, you must prove your loyalty not just in action, but in spirit. You must show us that you are willing to sacrifice, to fight for what we stand for." Samuel looked around at the faces of the warriors. They were silent, their eyes fixed on him, and he knew that this was not an empty challenge. They were waiting for him to prove himself worthy of the life he had been given. The woman stood up, her movements graceful and confident. "Tomorrow, we go to the valley," she said. "There, you will face your final test." The valley was a place Samuel had heard of, a place where the tribe had faced many of their greatest challenges. It was a land that was both beautiful and dangerous, filled with hidden dangers that could be both physical and spiritual. Samuel had no idea what to expect, but he knew that this would be the test that would truly define his place among the Apache. The next day, the tribe gathered at the edge of the valley, their faces serious, their spirits focused. Samuel felt a sense of unease settle in his chest, but he did not falter. The woman stood beside him, her eyes scanning the landscape. "This is the final test," she said. "The valley will show you who you are. There are those who come here and never return, lost to the land, to their fears, to their own darkness. But those who are strong, who are worthy, will return not just with their bodies intact, but with a deeper understanding of what it means to belong." With that, the tribe began their journey into the valley. The terrain was rugged, the path treacherous, but Samuel kept his focus. He had been through challenges before, but this felt different. This was not just about physical strength. This was about understanding, about connecting with something greater than himself. As they descended deeper into the valley, the landscape seemed to change. The air grew thicker, the sounds of the outside world faded, and a deep silence settled over them. It was as if the land itself was waiting for something. Samuel's heart began to race, and a strange feeling washed over him. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do, but he could feel that this was a moment of reckoning. The woman turned to him, her expression unreadable. "The valley will ask you a question," she said. "It will ask you what you are willing to sacrifice." Samuel's mind raced. What could the valley want from him? What was he supposed to give up? But before he could voice his thoughts, the ground beneath him shifted. The air grew heavy, and a strange energy filled the valley. The land was alive, watching, waiting. And then, in a flash, it hit him. The valley was not just a physical place. It was a test of his spirit, of his willingness to give up the very things that had held him back in life. The isolation, the fear, the doubts. It was asking him to let go of everything that had defined him, to step into a new life, to fully embrace the Apache way of living. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and felt the weight of the moment settle into his bones. This was it. He opened his eyes, ready to face whatever came next. The valley had asked its question, and now it was time for him to answer. The valley seemed to swallow Samuel whole as he stood there, his heart racing in his chest. The air was thick with the weight of the land, a sense of history and power that seemed to hum beneath his feet. The silence stretched on, unnerving, and yet, There was something oddly comforting about it. It was as if the earth itself was watching him, waiting for him to make a decision. The woman, who had been so steady and certain, was now silent beside him, her eyes trained on the landscape ahead. She didn't speak, but her presence was a reminder of everything he had learned, everything he had gained from the tribe. "What is it that you fear?" she asked, her voice soft but firm, as though she had read his thoughts. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. It was a simple question, but one that carried so much weight. What did he fear? For so long, he had feared being alone, feared being rejected, feared never finding a place where he truly belonged. He had spent years hiding from the world, building walls around himself to protect his heart. But here, in this moment, in the quiet of the valley, Samuel realized that his greatest fear was not of others, but of himself. The fear of not being enough. The fear of not living up to the expectations of the tribe, of failing them. And perhaps most of all, the fear of not truly embracing the new life he had been given. The woman turned to him, her eyes unwavering. "The valley asks you to face your fear," she said, "to look into it, and to understand it. Only then will you be free." Samuel swallowed hard. The weight of her words settled into his chest, and for the first time, he understood what she meant. His fear had held him back for so long, but now, it was time to face it head on. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. In that moment, everything around him fell away, the valley, the woman, the tribe. All that remained was him and his fear. The fear that had kept him running, that had kept him from fully embracing the life he had chosen. He focused on it, allowed it to wash over him. It was overwhelming, suffocating even, but he didn't turn away. He stayed with it, felt it fully, and in doing so, something inside him began to shift. The fear lost its power. It was still there, but it no longer controlled him. It was just a part of him, not the thing that defined him. Samuel opened his eyes, and the valley seemed different. The air felt lighter, the silence less oppressive. The fear was still there, but it no longer held the same weight. He turned to the woman, his heart pounding, and for the first time, he truly felt at peace. "I understand now," he said quietly. She nodded, her eyes softening. "Good," she replied. "You have faced your fear, and you have learned that it is not something to be feared, but something to understand." As they made their way back to the tribe, Samuel felt a sense of clarity settle within him. The trial in the valley had not been about defeating his fear, but about understanding it, about accepting that it was a part of him. He didn't have to run from it anymore. The journey had been long, but it had led him to a place where he could truly begin to live. The woman walked beside him, her presence a reminder of the strength she had shown him. And as they neared the camp, Samuel felt a sense of gratitude rise within him. This was his new life, one that he had earned, one that he was ready to embrace. The tribe was waiting for him, and he was ready to face whatever came next, no longer afraid of the future. He had found his place, not just among the Apache, but within himself. As the days passed, Samuel's life among the Apache continued to evolve. The trials of the valley had changed him in ways he could not fully understand, but one thing was clear. He was no longer the man who had arrived with nothing but uncertainty in his heart. The bond between him and the tribe deepened, forged not only through the tasks they shared but through the respect they had earned from one another. As he worked alongside the people who had taken him in, Samuel began to understand the true meaning of community. The woman, once a guide, had become more than that. She was a partner, a leader, and in the quiet moments they shared, he realized she had become the center of his world. But despite the growing closeness, there was something lingering in the air, an unspoken understanding that Samuel had yet to fully embrace. The day finally came when the woman approached him with a new challenge. "There is a ceremony," she said, her voice steady but her eyes reflecting a certain gravity. "It is a rite of passage for those who are accepted into the tribe. It is time for you to stand before the elders and speak your truth." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. A ceremony? He had thought his acceptance into the tribe had already been solidified. But this was different. This was a moment that would define his place among them. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice steady, though his pulse quickened. "You must tell your story," she replied. "You must speak of where you come from, what you have learned, and what you will offer to the tribe. It is not about what you say, but how you say it. The elders will listen to the words of your heart." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Samuel had never been one for speeches. He was used to quiet work, to actions that spoke louder than words. But this was something different. This was a moment where his voice would carry more than just the weight of his own life. It would carry the future of his place within the tribe. The ceremony took place under the vast expanse of the sky, the sun sinking low on the horizon. The tribe gathered in a large circle, their faces serious, their eyes trained on Samuel as he stepped into the center. The woman stood beside him, her presence both a comfort and a challenge. The elders, seated around the circle, nodded to him, their expressions unreadable. Samuel stood there for a moment, his thoughts swirling. He had never spoken to such a large group before. His past had always been one of solitude, but now, here he was, about to share everything he had become. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the quiet of the moment. "I was a man alone," he began, his voice steady but filled with the weight of truth. "For most of my life, I lived in isolation. I thought I was strong because I kept to myself, because I didn't need anyone." He paused, the words tasting unfamiliar on his tongue. "But I was wrong. I was weak. I was afraid of the world, afraid of what it might ask of me. I thought I could survive without belonging, but now I know that survival isn't enough." He looked around at the faces of the tribe, his heart swelling with a sense of gratitude. "I came here to learn, to find a place where I could be more than just a man who hides. You have shown me what it means to truly live, to live with purpose, with honor, and with strength." His words echoed in the stillness, and he felt a shift inside himself. For the first time, he spoke not just for himself, but for the community he had come to be a part of. "I offer you my strength," he continued, his voice gaining confidence. "Not just to work, but to protect, to honor the land, and to fight for what we believe in. I offer you my heart, for I am no longer alone. I am with you, and I will stand with you, always." There was a long silence after he spoke, the air thick with anticipation. The elders looked at one another, exchanging silent nods. Finally, the woman beside him spoke, her voice soft but clear. "You have spoken your truth," she said, "and it is enough." Samuel exhaled, the tension leaving his body. The ceremony had not been about grand declarations or rehearsed speeches. It had been about something deeper, an understanding, an acknowledgement of who he was and who he was becoming. The tribe began to murmur among themselves, their voices filled with approval. The woman turned to him, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You are one of us now," she said, and Samuel knew in that moment that he had truly found his place. As the sun set behind them, the tribe gathered around the fire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. Samuel sat among them, no longer an outsider, but a member of something far greater than himself. And as the night stretched on, he realized that this was just the beginning. The journey he had started was only the first step toward a life full of meaning, of purpose, and of belonging. As the weeks passed, Samuel settled into his new life with a sense of peace he had never known before. The tribe had accepted him fully, and he had learned what it meant to be part of something much larger than himself. The woman who had guided him from the beginning, the one who had shown him the way, now stood by his side as an equal. Their bond had grown stronger, not just out of necessity, but from mutual respect and understanding. The trials were behind him, but Samuel knew that this was not the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the camp, the woman approached Samuel. She held something small in her hand, something that gleamed in the fading light. It was a pendant, a simple but beautiful piece of jewelry that seemed to hold a history of its own. She stepped forward, her expression serious yet tender. "This is for you," she said softly. "It is a symbol of your place among us, of your strength, your honor, and your heart." Samuel took the pendant, feeling its weight in his hand. It was small, but it felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 years of tradition. It was a gift, but more than that, it was a recognition of the journey he had taken. The woman smiled at him, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that he had not fully understood before, a deep, unspoken connection. "You have earned this," she said. "But more importantly, you have earned the right to stand by us, to fight for us, and to protect what we hold dear." Samuel nodded, his heart swelling with pride. He had always felt like an outsider, a man who was disconnected from the world. But here, among the tribe, he felt like he had finally found a place where he belonged. The next morning, as the tribe prepared for their usual tasks, a sense of purpose filled the air. There was a new energy among them, a sense that something important was on the horizon. Samuel had been working alongside the warriors, learning their ways, and proving his worth. He had faced challenges, both physical and emotional, but each time, he had risen to meet them. He was no longer the shy farmer who had come to the tribe looking for answers. He had become something more. The day passed quickly, and as evening approached, the tribe gathered around the fire for their nightly council. Samuel sat among them, feeling the familiar warmth of the fire on his skin. The woman who had once been his guide now sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his. The elder, who had always been watchful, turned to face the group. "Samuel has proven himself," he said, his voice carrying a weight that was both firm and welcoming. "He has shown us not only his strength, but his heart. And because of that, we welcome him fully into our tribe. From this day forward, he is one of us." The words hit Samuel like a wave, filling him with a sense of fulfillment he had never thought possible. The tribe had not only accepted him, but they had also embraced him as one of their own. He looked around at the faces of the warriors, the elders, and the people who had become his family. They were not just a group of strangers anymore. They were his brothers and sisters, his comrades, his family. The fire crackled in the night, its warmth spreading through the camp. Samuel's heart swelled with gratitude. He had come to this place lost and alone, seeking something he could not name. But now, he had found what he was searching for, a home. He turned to the woman beside him, his heart full of emotions he could barely articulate. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "You showed me the way when I couldn't see it myself." She smiled at him, her eyes soft with understanding. "No, Samuel. You showed yourself the way. We were just here to guide you." As the fire burned brightly before them, Samuel knew that this was where he was meant to be. The trials, the challenges, and the moments of doubt had all led him here. He was no longer a man alone. He was part of a tribe, part of a family, and most importantly, he had found peace within himself. And as the stars began to fill the sky above, Samuel knew that his journey was far from over. It was just the beginning of a new life, one where he would stand side by side with his people, fighting for what they believed in, and living with the strength and honor they had taught him.